Hi, this is Casey Taylor, pastor to Quest Church, a community of grace in Urbana, Illinois. We're so glad that you're joining us and tuning in for this message. And if you don't already, we'd like to invite you to partner with us in our mission to help people be wholehearted followers of Jesus Christ. You can do that on our website at questwired.com under the tab Give. And now, here's today's message.
My name's Casey and I'm the pastor here. We are so glad to be celebrating Christmas with you this evening. Before I get into tonight's message, I want us to celebrate all of our volunteers and musicians who have been serving today. So would you please, with me, give them a thank you? They could be at home right now watching the 6th version of the Christmas Story on TNT and, drinking apple cider and eating Christmas cookies, but they've chosen to be here to bless all of us this evening. Well, our theme all month long at Quest has been, "O come all ye unfaithful." And we chose that theme because it's often a struggle to feel faithful, joyful, and triumphant instead of weary, worried, and worn down as we come into this season, maybe this year in particular. But you know what really helps to cure that feeling? It's knowing that you've got somebody who is for you. What I mean by that is not somebody who's there to serve you at your every beck and call, but somebody who is 100% in your corner. People who cheer for you, people who encourage you, people who push you to achieve your best, who want what is best for you. And you know what I've learned over the years from those people in my life who are for me? I've learned that I don't have to agree with them about everything for them to be in my corner, to be for me. They don't have to validate all of my life choices as good and wise, because I can tell you they are not. And I've even learned that I am willing to take criticism from people who I know are in my corner, because I know that they are often critiquing me to help me get better. They're not out to get me. And, as I was thinking about this, I thought back to when I was in high school, and many summers of high school, for about 2 weeks out of the summer, I was a part of a traveling show choir. I know it's hard to believe, but it's true. I just blended in so well to all the other voices that sounded better. But, we went and we rehearsed for about a week, and then we'd go travel, like to all these churches in whatever section of the country, like the Southwest or whatever. And every year they bring in a guest conductor. And I remember one in particular whose name was Dr. Epley. And Dr. Epley, he was smart, he was eccentric, and he was demanding. I mean, he worked us hard. Like, we were supposed to have a break 30 minutes ago. And I'm calling on, muscles of the body I didn't know you really needed to use to sing well. But there were times where we were pretty grumpy with him, and we weren't sure does he like us? But by the end, we knew that he was for us, because he called out of us so much good stuff that we frankly never would have believed was there. And I imagine if you thought about it, you could think of those people in your life who have been for you, who have been 100% in your corner. Maybe it was a parent or a teacher or a coach, or maybe it was some musical leader, or maybe just some other mentor or neighbor or friend. But, those people that are there just cheering you on, and no matter how much you screw up, they're not going to withdraw their care and love for you. And one of the things I love most about the Christmas story is getting this annual reminder that there is someone like that for me. To remember every single year that God is for us. Not out to get us, but for us. You may not believe that. You may not even have ever heard that. But that's what the Christmas story in large part, is trying to tell us. God is for us. How do we know that? How do we know that just from the Christmas story? Well, I'd like to take just a couple of minutes and tell you how we know that from the Christmas story. So we are going to look at that passage we read from Luke chapter 2. Listen again to those opening verses. You may remember them if you've seen Charlie Brown Christmas. But here they are. In those days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken in the entire Roman world. This was the first census that took place while Quirinius was governor of Syria, and everyone went to their own town to register. Caesar, he is the first Roman emperor. He's one of the most famous people in the world. He's powerful, one of the most powerful people in the world at the time. Luke tells us at the beginning of the gospel, this is a carefully researched account. But it's not a carefully researched story about Caesar Augustus, which is really kind of interesting. Instead, he has chosen to tell a story about a Jewish peasant in the backwater place of Nazareth. Why then does he talk about Caesar? Well, in part, he wants to anchor this Christmas story in history. But it's not just that he wants us to know that this is real stuff that happened to real people in a real place. It's also that he wants to contrast people like Caesar with how and where Jesus arrived in our world. How does Jesus arrive in our world? Well, again, look at verses 4 through 7. He tells us Joseph went from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea to Bethlehem, the town of David, because he belonged to the house and line of David. He went there to register with Mary, who was pledged to be married to him and was expecting a child. While they were there, the time came for the baby to be born. She gave birth to her firstborn, a son. She wrapped him in cloth, placed him in a manger, because there was no guest room available for them. What's Luke telling us? He's telling us that Jesus of Nazareth arrives on planet Earth among the poor and the powerless. And the fact is, most people in human history would qualify as poor and powerless. In the Roman world in which Jesus arrived, most people would have qualified as poor. Malnutrition popped up from time to time in many different communities. Most people throughout history, you think about it, they have not been rich and famous and powerful. They've not been kings and generals and presidents able to command other people with a word. Even today, Pew Research says that an astonishing 51% of the world population qualifies as low income. You know the word we use for low income? Poor. 51%. That's a lot of people when there's billions in the world. Surprisingly, only about 17% are classified as middle class. 15% are in that messy spot of upper middle class, somewhere between middle class and rich. And like the rich or super rich, whatever you want to call it, there's only like 7%. The multimillionaires and the Jeff Bezos and the Elon Musk and people like that. So in other words, most people fall into this category of people like Jesus' own family. But how do we know Jesus' family was poor and powerless? Well, Luke tells us all of that too. First, if you keep reading his story, he tells us Mary and Joseph are basically blue-collar people from small town. I was listening to a pastor message recently about this, and he said, Nazareth was like backwater kind of hillbilly country. And no offense for anybody who kind of grew up in a rural area. I grew up in small towns as well. But he said, if you want to think Nazareth, think the strumming of the banjos. Okay? He's like, it's not the power center. It's kind of the out-of-the-way place. That's Mary and Joseph and Jesus' family. But second, they're also on the move. I mean, all the inconvenience of having to go somewhere for a number of months. Who knows how long. Why? Because somebody more powerful than them told them they had to. I mean, I don't have the power to do that to a lot of people. Hey, just move. And neither did they. Third, though, Luke tells us that when they went to Bethlehem, they're crammed together into a house with a bunch of other people, just like all the other poor first century Judeans. Now, you got to do a little homework, I admit, to get that one, okay? But how do we know that? Well, we know it because Luke says there was no guest room available for them. Now, if you've watched old Christmas movies and cartoons or read older English translations, everybody knows that it says that there was no room for them in the inn. Problem is, that's not really a good translation of what Luke is saying, and it makes no sense of the hospitality culture at the time. Even today, you go up and like, I need a room. They're like, oh, yeah, well, hey, the room's full. We got a couch, or in this case, we've got a stable. They had a guest room. The guest room was already full, perhaps because somebody else was there for the census. And it's probably all extended family staying in the house together. It was not a city full of motels with no vacancy signs. The guest room is full. And by the way, people did not have their own private rooms at this time. You didn't have your own room painted, your own color, your own theme. Sorry, kids, if you had siblings, you were probably sleeping right next to them, squished between mom and dad, and if one of them snores, you're out of luck. You hope they took a bath sometime this week, okay? Fourth thing Luke tells us, though, is that when Jesus is born, his crib is a manger. It's an animal feeding trough. Now, again, how do we know they're poor because of that? Well, take a look at this picture that shows a recreation of a first century Judean Jewish house. You see there's two levels. That upper level, that would have been the guest room quarters. But you see how the guy's getting ready to take the donkey in the house? He's taking the donkey in the house. They didn't have a stable out the back of the yard. They didn't have a yard. Poor people brought the animals inside for a lot of different reasons, which meant that they also had feeding troughs, mangers in there. And this place is so full, they're like, where are we going to put this baby? Well, there's a feeding trough. They're poor. Last thing Luke tells us to let us know that Jesus arrives among the poor and powerless is who gets the royal birth announcement. Look again here at the story. It tells us in Luke chapter 2, verse 8, and there were shepherds living out in fields nearby, keeping watch over their flocks. And an angel of the Lord appeared to them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were terrified. But the angel said, do not be afraid. I bring you good news of great joy for all the people. Angels are not sent to Caesar or Quirinius or the priests in Jerusalem. The ambassadors are sent to poor, scruffy night shift workers. Now think about the message that sends. The one meant to bring peace and justice and prosperity to the whole world comes into the world, into a family, into life, like most people through human history. Now, by the way, it's not just for the poor and powerless. The angel says this is good news for all the people. Rich, poor, male, female, doesn't matter where you're from. Jesus is good news for everybody. What's Luke's point? Well, one thing he wants us to know. Jesus was not born into palaces of power. Jesus is with us. He's with us. He's one of us. Lives life like we do. But it goes even deeper than that. Because who cares? Who cares how a poor first century Jewish peasant lived his life? I mean, think about it. All the famous people in history, Alexander the Great, Queen Elizabeth I, Socrates, the great philosopher, we don't celebrate their birthdays for like a whole month long. Even if Jesus was just, a really extraordinary person, or we decided he really is one of the great men of history, or just a profound philosopher, why should we care how he lived his life? And it's because as you read those Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, those four authoritative life stories of Jesus, and you read the other things that the first Christians came up with as they thought about Jesus and experienced his life, it was like a bunch of clues were kind of piling up on top of each other, or like a puzzle. And they're getting all the pieces, and they're putting them together into this big picture of Jesus that's beginning to tell them more about who he is and what he means. They knew he was wise. They knew of his compassion. But at some point they began to conclude that Jesus of Nazareth, son of Mary, is God in the flesh. Isn't that crazy? I mean, it's unbelievable. Think about what one of your closest friends would have to do to convince you that they are God in the flesh. The bar's very high, right? Very, very high, because you see them every single day. But this was what they came to believe, that everything that makes God, God, lying right there, feeding trough, Bethlehem. As the hymns say, true God from true God, veiled in flesh the Godhead see. We call this incarnation, the embodiment of God. Pastor Tim Keller says this reminds us that God became vulnerable. Starts off in his mother's womb, a clump of cells, grows, forms, is born, has to be nursed by his mother, has to be changed. Learn to walk. He's vulnerable, which also means he can die. Now begin to connect the dots. If Jesus is with us, if Jesus is God in the flesh, then that must mean that God is with us. But again, if God is also vulnerable, then it's more than just saying, hey, this guy, this random good teacher, he knows your troubles. No, Luke is trying to say, we know that God is for us because Jesus is with us. Because Jesus is with us. Think about it. Think about how important it is to have somebody with you in life and with you when you go through the most difficult moments of life. I love what a colleague, Pastor Sharon Miller, said on Twitter recently about this. She said this: the incarnation is God's definitive rejection of theoretical compassion. While our culture has conflated compassion with feeling bad, this is really no compassion at all. To love like Jesus, we must draw near and suffer with. God with us has no interest in sentimentality. It's God suffering with. Recently, one of my best friends, his dad died unexpectedly. And those of us who had been, we'd known him for over a decade, and we've been in a spiritual growth group with him for over a decade. And we all agreed, like, we have to go. We have to be there for the visitation or the funeral. We need to be with him. We'd already sent the phone calls, the text messages. We care about you. We're sorry. Sympathy, praying for you, all that. We said, we got to go. Now, listen, we could have sent an expensive bouquet of flowers. We could have sent an incredible heartfelt card. But we went to be with. And you know why. Because being with someone when they're in need says, I'm for you, far more than a text message or even phone call or bouquet of flowers. Being with says, I am for you. We know God is for us because Jesus is with us. But it goes even deeper than that, because it wasn't just like Jesus was born and said, well, that was an amazing experience being born. See ya. He lives life like we do. He grows up. He has to eat. He has to sleep. He's even tempted the way we are. But it goes even deeper than that, because he goes all the way to the end of life. He goes through death with us. In fact, it's more than that, because what the Bible says is that he goes through death not just with us, but for us. God in the flesh, dying for us. And what it goes on to say, and what we believe based on what the Bible says, is that his undeserved death cancels out the death we deserve. His faithful life cancels our unfaithfulness. Jesus Christ suffers the hell of separation from God that our own selfishness and sin creates, proving once for all that God is for us. Now you think about it. Somebody, if you were going through a hard time, somebody moves in with you and says, I'm going to be with you, I'm going to be here, I'm going to help take care of the house, help you with what you need. I mean, you've got a pretty good idea, right? They're in your corner. They're cheering for you. They want you to succeed in life. They want what's best. They're for you. But if somebody says, I'm willing to die so you can live. And there's no doubt about it. 100% for you. And that is the amazing thing that the gospel says to us. And it's kind of all packed in right there at the beginning of the Christmas story. For us. Now, what do you do with that? What do you do with that? Well, what did the people in the Christmas story do? Verse 15 says, when the angels had left them and gone into heaven, the shepherds said to one another, let's go to Bethlehem and see this thing that has happened. They said, let's go look. Let's go look. Let's go take a closer look. Let's see. Can't hurt. I don't know what you believe. I don't know why you showed up to a Christmas Eve service. But for me, I think if it even might be true that God is for us, and he's made that clear through Jesus of Nazareth, that I want to know, is that for real? Somebody has said that in our culture, at this moment, we're more concerned with whether something is good before we care about whether it's true. And I've yet to meet the person who just hates the Christmas story, who just finds Jesus repugnant, and they're like, he's just a terrible person. No matter what people believe, their religious commitments, they'll something about Jesus. I mean, something is there. But it's not just, the claim is not just something. It's that in him, uniquely, God is saying, I am for you. I'm not out to get you. I'm out to help you, to bless you, to seek what's best for you. Now, if that's even possibly true, I want to know if it's real. Now, we don't know what happened to the shepherds after this story. We don't know how it changed them. We do know, though, from the testimony of the Bible and from history, that it changed lots of other people's lives, millions, even billions of people who said, I'm going to go take a closer look. And when they got there, they heard the invitation of Jesus that he would extend years later, and he would say to people, come to me, receive me, welcome me into your life. Trust me to lead you through this life and into the next. And when people did that, what they heard was that they heard Jesus say, I will come and change you from the inside out. I'm coming and I'm going to kill all the stuff in you that needs to die. And I'm going to bring to life in you more good than you ever dreamt possible. Now, I don't know about you, but man, I want that to be true. Don't you want it to be true? I want the Christmas story to be true. I want to know that someone is 100% for me in my corner. And if that someone might just be Almighty God, creator of everything, then that's worth a closer look. So tonight and tomorrow and every day after that, I hope to do that. Don't you? At least take a closer look. I want to end by inviting you to turn your attention to the screen so you can hear not my story, but the story of a friend of mine who decided she was going to take a closer look at Jesus.
Hi, I'm Holly Clemens. I am a retired Champaign County judge. I've been attending Quest since last May, although I attended Quest virtually before then, and have subsequently been attending virtually. Where is home? Home is currently in Urbana. I originally was born in Chicago, grew up in the north suburbs of Chicago in Skokie and Lake Forest, moved to Champaign-Urbana in 1991 and have lived here since. Hopefully the people at Quest wouldn't know that I am a retired judge. Hopefully they've not had professional contact with me, but unfortunately some may have had some contact with me in that role. My faith background when I was a child was pretty much non-existent. So both of my parents and my grandparents were all Christians. My mom and dad actually met at a congregational church And for whatever reason, they decided church was not something they wanted to do with their children. So I was never baptized. We never went to church. The only time I would attend church was if there were weddings or funerals or something like that. And it was something I always wondered about, but it was something that was mysterious and scary to me because it was something I didn't know about. There was a lot of ritual, and I just found it very intimidating. So I didn't go to church until we moved down here to Champaign-Urbana. Then we did the tour of churches. Well, I decided to become a follower. It had been a fairly long process because I started at First United Methodist probably in 2017, maybe 16, 17, somewhere in there. And so it's something that I'd thought about for quite a while, and I was doing small groups at FUMC for several years, and then decided at some point it was time to make the commitment, and you were kind enough to allow me to do that. It really, really was quite a wonderful thing. I didn't expect any type of great epiphany, but all of my small group from First United Methodist attended along with some very close friends who are Christians. And after it was over that night, it just felt good because I had made that commitment, made it a public announcement basically, and just felt a real sense of peace after doing that day. I feel that I don't have to hopefully worry about things quite as much because I just basically give it to God and let Him deal with all of the issues that we all face from day to day, and those some very difficult issues. So I really feel that it's just been a very good thing for me personally to be able to basically give my issues and problems to God, and then also rejoice in and be grateful for all of the things that He's given me. Advice would be to keep an open mind and try it. I think that it can be intimidating, it can be scary. There are times when I was in Bible study at FUMC where I just felt like I didn't know anything, especially when we were studying Revelation. I'm thinking, wow, this is very bizarre. And so just hang in there, be open to some new ideas. One of the things I love about the Methodists is that they look at this as a journey. You're going to continue on this process for your whole life. So you may start at one point and then you keep working forward. So I got that and having grace. I need lots of grace. So I would just ask people to keep an open mind, accept help from others, and participate.